Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 9 of Vinland Saga. Man, I really had a lot of fun with episode 8. Whiteboard Coon came out, we talked a lot about the characters and how they're tied to what they're a slave to and how that's related to the story as a whole. It was really a lot of fun. I absolutely loved it. But I got a few comments before we start. I think I'm going to have to record ahead though. I'm going to have to record ahead because everybody on Patreon's been great. Everybody on Patreon has been really cool about not getting spoilery, but some people on YouTube, the comments are getting a little spoilery, and I know nobody's meaning to spoil, but I'm like, I'm not a history person at all. And so I like that in the sense of this show, because I feel like if I was somebody that was really up on my Viking history, then a lot of the surprises and historical events would be spoiled to me. So I don't really want to know anything. And there's some comments that are skirting the line. I'm like, I don't want to be spoiled. Like, for example, several people, not just one, but several people over the last couple episodes have been like, did you get what they're talking about at the beginning? The country that's over across the sea, that's in the northern western hemisphere? I'm like, I get it. It's America. I was speculating, I think back in episodes 5 or 6, and people were like, don't you get it? And I'm like, I do, but I wanted to speculate because it wasn't spelled out for me, because that's the fun of it. But now I don't have to speculate. It's America. Cool. So there's that. So it's fine. I like speculating and having the mystery of it, and it's fun. But now I don't have to speculate, so it's like that mystery's over. So I guess that's it. So I guess I won't talk about it anymore. So it just makes me worried to talk about things on the discussion, because then I'm afraid people are going to like comment about it, and I want to read the comments and respond to them, because that's kind of the whole purpose of my channel, is to talk with you all about these shows. But if people just can't be patient and let me do things, then I can't answer the comments. And so I don't want to get to that point. So, and then somebody was like, well, why don't you say in the discussion not to spoil you? So for the last time, hopefully for a while, please don't spoil me. Please don't. Please be patient with me. I'll get it eventually. I feel like I'm somewhat intelligent. I can figure it out. It just may take me a while. Some things go right over my head very easily, as you all know, and some things I can pick up on pretty quickly. So just don't spoil me. But I may have to watch ahead just to get ahead of spoilers, because I'm feeling like with episode 8, the last one that came out, everybody's been super cool about it in the comments on Patreon, but I just have a feeling that people on YouTube are going to be like, this historical event, and I'm like, just let me go. so there's that. But I do have a couple other comments. I talked about season 2 coming out in the last episode, or in episode 7. And Anita Meyer talked about how the WIT team is actually going to be working on season 2 with Mappa, and I thought that was really cool. I'm like, awesome. I'm glad that there's going to be members of the animation team for season 1 working on season 2, because Mappa kind of inherits a lot of projects from different companies, especially in subsequent seasons, and that's cool. Mappa does a good job, but I do appreciate the fact that the original production team kind of sticks with it, with the new production team, because it makes it feel more connected to the previous season when it's like that. Attack on Titan, for example, the 4th season was picked up by Mappa, and it's great. I really like it. But there's some aspects of WIT that I miss, and then there's other aspects I'm okay with Mappa taking it over for that reason. So it's kind of a mixed bag, right? But I am glad to know that, Anita. Thank you so much. Shimoyama, I really liked this in episode 7. The idea that the general was maybe based on Jabba the Hutt and the mangaka's inspiration from Star Wars. I'm like, that's really cool. I was likening him to like a toad, and that makes a little bit more sense that there's like a Jabba the Hutt reference. That's pretty cool. I like it a lot. And then finally, Edgar, this part floors me. The idea that the very beginning of the manga was episode 8. Because I talked in the discussion, I was like, I'm glad that we spend the first 7 episodes learning about Thorfinn's character and Thor's character, and kind of following Thorfinn from a child up until this point where he's 17, and seeing how this revenge narrative he has dedicated himself to has developed and grown over time. I thought that was really cool. And Edgar was saying that the manga starts out with the events of episode 8, and then you backtrack and learn all of that. And I'm like, oh! So honestly, I'm kind of glad the way that the anime does it. Because I feel like if I had just started, and I think I said this in the discussion last episode, if we had just started out with Thorfinn's character in episode 8 and then worked our way back, I don't think it has the same impact. It's kind of like a Schrodinger's cat. You don't really know, because I've already experienced it. But I feel like I wouldn't have the same appreciation for Thor's and Thorfinn's character. But knowing that now, the duel makes so much more sense. Because Askeladd says things like, did I kill your father? How'd your father die? And as the audience member watching episode 8, you're like, we know how he died. We know your part in it. We've watched it the last 7 episodes. But if you started out with the manga like this, and Askeladd's asking these questions, it's not only to goad Thorfinn, but it's to get us, the audience, invested in knowing, well, I want to know the answers to these questions. Did you kill Thor's? How did he die? Why is Thorfinn so angry about it? Why is he so hell-bent on revenge? And Thorfinn's coldness in the village makes a lot more sense, and it's a really cool parallel to when we go back to see his village in the past. It's really clever. It's clever because it shows how the mangaka was thinking about those events and how they were going to unfold. It's clever in the manga, and I think it's clever that the anime decided to say, no, we're going to give the audience this version of it. It's the same events, just rearranged a little bit. I really like that. So Edgar, thank you for that comment and the kind words. That was really cool to note. And now we're a third of the way done with season 1. So I feel very fortunate and slightly nervous because I have 3 seasons of 3 series I'm watching, Neon Genesis, Death Note, and Vinland Saga. And all 3 seasons, all 3 series, I'm done with Act 1 at the same time. So it's a great feeling. It's also very nerve-wracking because usually the end of your first act, you've gotten all the characters introduced, and now it's time to throw them off the deep end. And I feel like with this series, we've already gone off the deep end. So where do we go to from here? And several of you are like, this is only the beginning. And I'm like, of course it is. So I'm really excited. I've talked enough, but I'm ready to dive into episode 9 and see what all is going to happen with Thorfinn, our boy. And now we've gotten Floki's back in the game, Thorkell's back in the game. We're getting more back into these characters, and I'm pretty excited to see what's going to go down. Maybe Whiteboard Canute will come out? I don't know, but let's find out, shall we? We are going to start episode 9 of Vinland Saga, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. I have a feeling that Whiteboard Canute is going to need to come out a lot after episode 8, because yeah, we now that we've introduced the characters and the cast officially, I feel like a lot of this series is going to be breaking down just the ideologies of these characters and their beliefs and their views on battle and on war. And in this episode especially, like, there were lots of conversations about motivations and what drives people to fight and why would they fight to begin with. Man, Thorfinn at the very end looked like a grisly 30-year-old man trapped in a 17-year-old's body. It was really grisly, like, which of course he dislocated his shoulder and broke some ribs and sprained an ankle, and Askeladd's like, well, you came back, look at you, you made it. It's like, but Askeladd was interesting in this. Floki's interesting. This whole mystery around Canute. I have theories, but I'll talk about the theories in this. Again, I'm probably glad that I'm watching a little bit ahead, because that way I have a feeling somebody in the comments will be like, well, no, it's actually this. And I'll be like, I don't want to know. So, you know, there's some theories, but I like the idea that a lot of this episode talks about motivation with the characters and why they're doing the things that they're doing. But Thorkell the Tall, what the hell? I like that Askeladd is like evil neutral. I feel like Askeladd's like evil neutral. He just doesn't really, he's kind of out for himself, but he doesn't really care either way. He's gonna go wherever the money is, but he's really out for himself and his own personal agenda. But Thorkell just wants to fight people. He's like Bjorn on steroids. Like, Bjorn seems like he's reined in and has like his own limits, which we'll talk about. But Thorkell's like, I just want to fight, and the bigger the challenge, the better. And so he's like, I'm going to fight on the losing side. And then when they actually win, he's like, well, this isn't fun. Like, just Thorkell is pure chaos. Like, he is pure chaotic neutral. I feel like he just doesn't care who he fights as long as he fights. I really like Thorkell's character. I really like characters that are like chaotic like him. But there seems to be like a moral grounding to him, right? Because he's not just a murder monster. It's not that. He's a warrior. And he treats Thorfinn like a warrior. And now that he knows he's Thor's kid, you know that Thorkell's like, wait, I want to fight Thor's kid. I want to fight the child of Thor's. I remember him. And Thorfinn has no clue that we, the audience, know that Thorkell and Thor's battled together. So he has no idea. And so it's funny that we're seeing Floki and him kind of have the conversation. And I feel like Thorkell knows Floki pretty well. He's like, yeah, I don't trust you at all. You're a snake. Nope. But we need to talk about this episode because there's a lot going on. I have theories. There's lots of things happening. The king is interesting. There's just a lot happening. And I was like, okay, Whiteboard Coon, you're going to need to come out for this one. But, all right. So the Battle of London Bridge. What I like about this is that it's very historical and it's very accurate. Like, yeah, is it possible that there's a little bit, we've talked about this throughout the whole series, that there's a little bit of exaggeration in the narrative of Thorkell throwing giant logs by himself and boulders and stuff? Yeah, that's part of the storytelling. But what I like is that it's very realistic in that London Bridge is not this grand, magnificent structure. No, it's very realistic. It's literally like a fortressy log bridge. Like it's historically accurate, and I like that. So it's 1013, Thorfinn 17, and we're at London Bridge, where we have this battle taking place, and it's not exactly going the way that the Vikings and the Danes would want to go in London. Yeah, I love the imagery of just the shields and people like falling on the chains and everything. And yeah, it's funny because the English soldiers in here, they're kind of the same way as, the Viking soldiers and some of King Svein's men. They all have like the matching uniforms and the armor and everything. And then these guys on top of the bridge just look like a bunch of country bumpkins that showed up with bows and spears and stuff. Some of them have helmets, some of them don't. They just look like they were a hodgepodge gathering of guys defending their city, right? That don't really have a lot of experience with battle. And it's interesting. And you see all the ships and stuff that have like sunk beneath them. Yeah. And so, yeah, I like the Askeladd's like, that's not really a bridge. It's a fortress. Interesting. And he's like, well, he's like, they've survived many attacks over the years thanks to this bridge. And it has a lot of history. And it's like, haha, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And it still will have lots of history, right? And then Bjorn's like, this is not the time to be complacent, Askeladd. It's like the city is going to be trouble. He said, you said it would be an easy win, and that's why I'm here. So we need to break a bunch of characters down. We've got, this is our setting for this episode. It changes because they decided to leave and go to Wessex from there. But we have Bjorn. All right. Bjorn doesn't get a lot of screen time in this episode, but we do get a few things about his character, and that he's going for the easy win. Which is funny because it's the polar opposite of Thorkell. Thorkell and Bjorn, it's funny. I'm going to draw we're going to do some connectors here. So I'm going to put Thorkell kind of over here. Thorkell the Tall, right? Because Thorkell's thing is that he loves a challenge, right? So he loves a challenge. So the funny thing with all of this is that on the surface, you could argue that if you think Bjorn and Thorkell are warriors, they are connected in that way, but on the same side, I'm going to do like a little squiggly line here. They are not the same in terms of the reasons why, in terms of how they like to do battle. Bjorn wants it to be an easy win. He wants to go in, get the kill, be done. Thorkell wants to just drag it out and be like the biggest challenging thing. And so they're very different in that regards, right? And I guess if some people consider Bjorn not a warrior, I can see that. I kind of do right now, but I'm kind of like on the line with him as being a warrior. I think he has like the warrior's code with it. But then we have Askeladd, who we're going to put up here. We don't get too awful lot with Askeladd on here, but we're gonna tie him in here. And so Askeladd is a warrior. I do think he is, right? And so we're gonna say that these does not agree. That's what the squiggly line is gonna be. Okay. So yeah. And Askeladd's saying, well, sorry, I didn't think that Thorkell would side with the enemy. He's like, I didn't think that was going to be the case. And then so he notices that some of his hair is falling out of his goatee. I don't know if that's just for comedic effect Or if maybe he's stressed and he's just been doing this so much that it's starting to come out and he's like, I need to not be so stressed. I don't know. Or maybe he's getting older. It's a sign that Askeladd's aging. I don't know. And then he's like, he's in bed with the enemy for the money. So Bjorn is convinced. He is convinced that Thorkell is driven by the money. But Askeladd does not think money is swaying Thorkell alone. I think Askeladd has a little bit more respect for Thorkell than Bjorn does. Bjorn's like, this guy's just a crazy dude. I don't like him. And I think Askeladd has a bigger respect for Thorkell, and he recognizes him as much because he's a warrior, right? I feel like Thorkell is at this point in time like embodying the fighting spirit of a warrior. Because here's the thing, he doesn't just senselessly murder and slaughter everybody he goes up against. Like, he honors the duel between Thorfinn and him, and he honors it. He could have just killed Thorfinn. He could have just ripped him apart, honestly. Like, his head fit around that one guy's entire skull. If he wanted to kill Thorfinn, he could have just murdered him and just did it. But that's not... There was something more to it. It almost seemed like Thorkell could see a challenge rising in Thorfinn and wanted to keep testing him. And then even when he gets his fingers chopped off, he's like, I want to still battle you. Come on. Like, he wanted the battle to keep going. And he saw potential in Thorfinn. So he kind of embodies the fighting spirit of a warrior, that there is a respect there, oddly enough. But at the same time, I definitely think that I could see Thor's being like, you don't want to be like Thorkell all the way. You know, you want to find that happy middle. You don't want to totally be like Thorkell. But I could see and Askeladd clearly respects him in some regard, right? And Bjorn has already made up his mind about... Bjorn is like, he's so judgmental against Thorkell. Bjorn's like, he's sleeping with the enemy for money. Like, I want a traitor, blah, blah, blah. And then Askeladd brings up the good point. He's like, we're kind of the same. Askeladd's like, we are the same as Thorkell. He's like, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're just following the king because he's paying us. Like, we don't really want to... He's like, what stake do we have in this war? He's like, we're in this for the money too. He said, we sided with the army of Denmark because we thought Sweyn had a chance to win. So there is a connection there between... And so I would think that, again... So I'm going to say that we're going to cut over here. That they agree about the opportunity. That Askeladd, make this a little bit heavier. Askeladd and Bjorn are both on the same wavelength in the fact that we joined the army of Denmark because we thought this would be an easy win. It'd be an easy way for us to get spoils, to get rich quick. That's why we're doing this. If it were hard or seemed impossible, we wouldn't mess with it, because Askeladd is an opportunist. And he's like, I'm not going to mess with something if it's not going to be worth my time, right? He messes with Thorfinn because he knows it's worth his time. He's like, I know this kid's going to work for me, and I've got him in the palm of my hand. I've got him by the balls because he's going to want me to duel him. So he'll do whatever I tell him to because I've got him on a leash. So Askeladd's like, if I didn't, I wouldn't mess with Thorfinn. Whereas, and he kind of is agreeing with Bjorn. He's like, we're doing this because we're opportunists and we're in it for the spoils. But that is not how Thorkell works. And I think Askeladd tries to point that out to Bjorn. He's like, I don't think Thorkell's just in it for the money. Don't think that's the whole deal, right? And so looking out there at the sea, he's like, the other clans are all the same. They're desperate to prove themselves on the battlefield because they want to increase their spoils. And I love this line that he says. He's like, well, with so many men here, we're not getting much. So I love that Askeladd knows the situation. He's like, He's like, there's too many to spread the wealth. He's like, we just got to play dodgeball in this. He's like, there's all these guys here that are trying to do the same thing we are and get the spoils of war. But if all these guys live, there ain't going to be a lot of spoils. So all we have to do is outlast everybody else. He's like, we just need to play it smart, outlast everybody. And it'll be like dodgeball. Let them get out. Let them get killed. And then we'll swoop in at the end when the enemy's weak and we'll just attack and go. Kind of like a vulture, right? He's like, we'll just go and get our stuff when everybody else is already dead. And yeah, Bjorn's like, and then Bjorn says, I don't fight for money. I like to kill. So that's interesting because he says he fights to kill. Fights to kill, not for money. But that's the thing. Bjorn thinks that Thorkell's just in it for the money, and he doesn't think that's right. But the reality is that they're actually pretty, and my poor green marker is like slowly going out. He's like, the funny thing is that him and Thorkell actually have that in common. They're not fighting just for the money. Thorkell seems kind of a mixture between Bjorn and Askeladd in certain ways, and then he's completely opposite both of them in other ways. But he seems like, just like Bjorn, he's fighting just for the spirit of battle and for killing and everything. He's fighting for that reason and for the challenge of it. But also he seems like he's smart enough to know the writing on the wall and to take advantage of situations when he can. Like Thorkell seems like he's smart enough. He's not just a big, brutish, dumb man that's just a monster. Nah, he's got enough strategy in mind, and he's kind of crazy. And he's like, nah, I'm just fighting for the heck of it. Let's fight, you know? So he seems like, in terms of him and Askeladd being similar, they both seem like they're pretty intelligent. They're both intelligent enough, right? So that's interesting. That's interesting. Bjorn's pretty proud of the fact, and Askeladd's like, you just like to kill. He's like, I can truly rely on a man like you, Bjorn. And that's so true, because to Askeladd, Bjorn's perfect. Because Bjorn's not in this for the money, he's in it just for the fighting. And so Askeladd never has to worry about Bjorn betraying Askeladd if they run short on money, or if Askeladd shortchanges him, or if they don't get all of the, or if Askeladd takes a little bit more of the profit than Bjorn does. Bjorn doesn't care. He's just in it to fight. So Askeladd's like, you're perfect. As long as you stick with me and as long as I give you enough fights, it's fine. So it kind of ties back to episode 8 where he's talking about using people. He's like, you just need to know how to exploit the right people. So there is a sense that Askeladd is exploiting Bjorn in a sense because he knows Bjorn's just in it for the fighting and he can use that to his advantage, right? It's great. And he's like, all those bigwigs want London, like all the royalty does. He's like, if we capture the Thames River, we can set up a supply line in the inland areas in Wessex. Okay, so they want to set up a supply line in Wessex, taking Thames River. Okay. So by the end of this episode, that's what they end up doing. They're going to go and try to set up a supply line in Wessex to try to take the river and try to turn things around. Askeladd's not dumb enough to go straight into the front lines. He's like, no. He's like, that seems like a bad idea. I don't want to do that. So he's like, let's do this. Let's play the long game. Let's play the long game, go out here to the side for a while, and then we'll come back and take over things. That seems like that would make the most sense. And Bjorn's like, well, yeah, all the top leaders have their eyes on this battlefield, so it'll be a place if you want to stand out. And like, all I could think of was like a Goofy movie and the standout theme playing while it's the standout theme playing as Askeladd looks up into the crow's nest. It's like Powerline is playing with Thorfinn. Seems right. And so Bjorn's like, what's your plan? He's like, everybody wants to stand out. Like, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, I don't really have a plan. I'm just using somebody. And so, of course, we pan up to Thorfinn epically sitting atop the mast. Of course we would. Because where else would he sit, right? Listening to their conversation. Or not listening. He's like, I have some work for you. Go bring me Thorkell's head. Like, just like it's nothing. Like, bring me his head, kid. And that's when Thorfinn says, he just looks over him and like, well, will you give me my reward? Like a dog. He's like, okay. It's the same as always. You're so stubborn. Getting worked up about a fight you can't win. Maybe you get it from your father. And just takes the knife and just slices it through the pot. I love the lighting on Thorfinn. He's like, my only wish as a warrior is to beat you in a duel. I love the lighting on Thorfinn's face where he's just like don't forget. So we're gonna put Thorfinn. I'm gonna put Thorfinn over here. So Thorfinn's whole thing is that as a warrior, he only wants to win the duel with Askeladd. That is the only, in the only sense of the word, that's the only way he considers himself a warrior, is that he wants to beat Askeladd in that duel. And that's pretty much it, right? Although, that does tie him a little bit to Thorkell. Even though Thorfinn does not think him and Thorkell are the same at all, it does tie him a little bit, because Thorkell's whole thing is he just wants to duel people. He just wants to battle people. He just wants a challenge, right? And if you think about it, Thorkell and Thorfinn aren't totally dissimilar, because their both whole agenda as a warrior is battling people. It's just Thorkell has not narrowed it down to one person. Thorkell's like, I'll battle anybody, and he takes joy in it. Whereas Thorfinn is only after one guy, and he'll do whatever it takes to get to that one guy, and he does not take joy in it. So it's the funniest thing is that they're very similar in a way, but they're also extremely dissimilar too. So I like this. I like that all these characters are having some kind of connection, but also things that drive them apart. It's a fun time, right? But yeah, that lighting. Our next duel will be your last. And he's like, I'm going to carve out your heart and offer it to my father's spirit. And Askeladd's like, them's fighting words, but okay, kid. Sure you will. Like, he's like, I want you to. And then he just tosses it right back. He's like, then get to work. Only those who fight on the battlefield get what they desire. He's like, if you're the Britney Spears is gonna work bitch like comes on, and Askeladd's like, you better go work then, Thorfinn, if you're gonna go get this duel. Oh my god. And he's like, that's the way of the warrior. So him telling Thorfinn that warriors only get their desires on the battlefield. I do think that's interesting, because I think that contrasts a little bit with Thor's himself, Askeladd, that saying, because I think Thor's was a warrior, and then the question is, Thor's no longer wanted to be involved in the battlefield at all, so was he no longer a warrior? But then he died a warrior, so where does that leave him? So it's funny that Askeladd says that, and it kind of goes a little bit against what Thor's whole deal was too, so that's interesting. And Thorfinn's just tired. He's a 7. He's like, my head's not cheap, you know. I'll duel you as often as you like. And we get that shot of Thorkell standing atop the bridge with that giant smile. Oh my god. I have a feeling we'll be taking a lot of pictures of Thorkell in this. I'm feeling in this episode there's going to be a lot of pictures of Thorkell. But yeah, so that's our intro. That's our intro to the episode. Oh my gosh. So yeah, so Thorfinn just looks tired. He looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. As always, I feel bad for Thorfinn, because I feel like he's just so consumed by revenge. At this point, he's just doing it just because it's almost like an obligation. He can't let it go. It's just like gnawing at him. I was honestly a bit worried about these guys on the ship, because they said they're heading towards the bridge, and I feel like that was a bad idea. And I'm glad that Floki's ship went there first before the other guys, because I was a little bit worried they'd get to the bridge and get killed, but I don't think that happened. I think it was more of Floki's men. And they've got the big mast and everything. And Askeladd is like, oh, are they Floki? So Askeladd knows Floki. He's going to try to win Thorkell over to his side. saying he'll double whatever England pays. So what's interesting here is that Askeladd, he knows how Floki works. Now, granted, he's met Floki before. That's the whole thing with Thor's and the assassination years ago. But it seems like even in the short amount of time we saw Askeladd with Floki, he's already figured him out. He knows how he works, which is curious. And so Bjorn says that Thorkell will follow the money, but Askeladd's like, I don't think he will. I don't think he'll take the offer. Askeladd is the thing about Askeladd is that one of his greatest assets as a character is that he's very good at understanding other characters. He's very good at understanding people and their motivations. He just has a sixth sense where he can kind of understand characters and what drives them, right? So Bjorn looks at things on a very surface level. Bjorn's like, well, he's just in it for the money. He'll follow that offer from Floki. And Askeladd's like, no, I don't think he will. He's like, I think that Thorkell, there's more to him than that. It's not going to be so easy for Floki to win him over, right? I love it. And so then I love that as they're going closer and growing closer, the people are firing at him, and Floki's like, we're messengers, stop. And of course the people are like, nope, gonna keep firing. Like, it's very realistic. It's one of those things like in any other movie, as soon as the messengers show up, the people would just stop and let them speak. But here, very realistically, the army's like, no, don't take any chances, try to kill these people. And it's Thorkell that makes them stop. Thorkell's like, whoa, let's hear these guys out. I know this dude. Holy cow. And then I love that Thorkell just walks up to the soldier and his entire palm goes over the man's head. Thorkell is a giant. He should have been called the troll, not Thor's. He's huge. And he's like, everyone sees fire. And he just like, he makes the bridge shake when he walks. That's so crazy. He's like, oh, hey, Floki, it's been a while. Like, just the crazy hair driving up, like, looking crazy. So, I'm going to put Floki. Actually, I'm going to put Floki right here, because I feel like we do get quite a bit with Floki. Okay. We'll put him right there. And so, Thorkell's like, hey, it's been a while. You've been doing pretty well. Look at you. You got your own boat and all your men. And Floki's like, enough with the pleasantries. He's like, I'm here to deliver a message. I'm just an errand boy at this point, but I'm here to do my job. And so I like that he tells him, he's like, the King of England has escaped to the land of the Franks. So he's gone to France. Resistance is futile. Okay. And he asks them to surrender. And in the name of Thor, I'll spare your lives of you and your men. Which I'm like, bullshit, you will. I'm like, we're going to put the king. We're going to put old King Sweyn right here. I don't trust Sweyn at all. I don't trust him as king. He's like, oh, we'll spare the lives of you and your men if you surrender to us, and then we'll leave you your fortunes. No, that's not going to happen at all. I was like, no, you're going to kill all of them if they surrender, and you're going to take all their money, because that's like what we've seen in every episode since then, since before this episode. I'm like, no, I don't trust him at all. Mm-mm. And he says, go back to the army, Thorkell. Those are the wishes of His Highness. And I just like, I love that Thorkell says, oh, is he here? Is he like in that boat with you giving this? It's almost like, I feel like Thorkell does not respect the king at all. He's like, oh, he's here battling with y'all? Really? He came out to the field? Oh, okay. Cool. Like, I just love that he just is not like swayed at all. He's tough for such an old man. Which begs the question of how old the king is. I feel like the king's like in his late 60s, maybe 70s at this point, or at least late 60s, right? So he has, we want to say that Sigvaldi is Thorkell's brother. We're going to make note of that, right? So I love that shot. I want to take a picture of it. Thorkell gets a lot of great shots in here, but that one with Floki looking down on him. And Floki's like, why are you drawing your bow against a friend? He's like, for so long we fought as warriors side by side. And Thorkell's like, that didn't make us friends. Like, I just love, he looks so confused. He's like, no. He's like, you must not misread the flow of the world. Ah, so Floki talks about the flow of the world. And this is why I liken him to like a snake. He just goes where it's best for him. That's kind of one of the reasons I don't really care for Floki, is that he's like Askeladd a little bit, right? And maybe that's why Askeladd knows him so well, because he's like, you're kind of like me a little bit. He's like Askeladd in that he is an opportunist. Floki is an opportunist, right? But the thing that I think separates him from Thorkell and the others is that he's just, and he is out what's best for him, kind of like Askeladd, but the means in which Floki does it are not honorable. Like, he is very underhanded, and he'll do whatever it takes to win, but there's not any sense of honor to it. I feel like even when Thorkell's beaten poor Thorfinn to a pulp, there's a little bit of honor there. He could have killed the kid, but he decided not to. There's a little bit of honor in what Askeladd does in the duel. He could kill Thorkell, but he doesn't. I feel like if Floki dueled Thorfinn and won, he'd kill him. Like, there would be no honor in that. Like, he'd be like, let's just kill him and move on. And it kind of ties back to the fact that Floki didn't want to get his hands dirty and kill Thors himself, because he knew that the possible consequences would hurt him, and it was easier to have someone else kill him than to dirty his own hands. And in this world, there's no honor in that. So I like this flow of the world conversation. He's like, oh, your brother Sigvaldi is worried. And I like that Thorkell's like, you think bringing up my bro is going to help? I just love that he's like, man, you're really trying real hard, Floki. You're talking about this flow of the world and bringing up my brother like it's going to sway my opinion. He's like, yeah. He's like, flow of the world. I just feel like Thorkell's like, no. Thorkell's like, I don't like that. He's like, who gives a shit about the flow of the world? He's like, I'm in my own flow, dude. I like this a lot. He's like, I see. He's like, I was fighting against the English myself until last year, and that's why I know. He's like, they're really weak. And at this point when he says they're really weak, he starts talking in Norse, and the English can't understand him. They're like, what's he saying? What's he saying about us? And he basically flat out says they're a bunch of sheltered city boys. They're not strong. They're weak. They lack spirit. They're like, Prince Edmund was the only general who stood a chance and could handle the army of Denmark. This country is finished. So apparently Prince Edmund has died, because he's like, he was the only general that could handle things. So I guess Thorkell is acknowledging that, I'm going to put this up here, that Prince Edmund is dead. And I feel like he was mentioned maybe in episode 5 or 6. Maybe in episode 6 he was mentioned. Maybe the women the women from the village that were cleaning, maybe they talked about Prince Edmund, that he was the one that tried to unite the Danish, maybe. I don't remember. But yeah, but apparently he's no more. So Thorkell's like, he was the only one that could really do anything, and he's dead. So yeah, this country is finished. And Floki's like, well, then you've acknowledged that this is a losing battle, so you'll just come back over to our side. And Thorkell's like, so, because they're doing so bad, it'd be way more fun if I fought against you. Like, I just love this. He's insane. He's like, it'd be way more of a challenge. And Floki's like, wait, what? He's like, okay, enough talk, bye. Let's go to the next part. Let's kill him. And he's like, well, no, wait a minute. He's like, I'll promise you double what England's giving you. He's like, and that's, you see that Thorkell's like, oh, you're trying to sway me with money? It's like, no. He's like, here I go, Floki. Oh my God. He's like, I'm not swayed at all by that. He's like, I'm just, they're paying me, so why not? That's the thing. It's a nice little bait and switch that you think that Thorkell has been in it for the money, but in reality, no, he's just in it for the challenge. The money's just a bonus. And he threw the rock, but here's the thing. He intentionally missed. He's like, oh, I missed. Nah, that was intentional. That was a warning. He's like, okay, we're done talking now. I'm not going over to your other side. If you don't want me to kill you, move on. So I like that. I like that Thorkell's like, if you're not serious and you're going to battle me, then get out. Like, I like that, because, yeah, he could have just killed him. And he's like, Floki's like, get out of here. Nope. And he's like, oh, man, kill him. So he gave him a fighting chance to row away. And he knew that the archers there weren't that strong. So I'm sure that when he's like, kill him, he knew that it wasn't going to do much. And he tells Floki, he's like, go ask King Sweyn whether he's bored of always fighting battles he's going to win. I love that. I love it. He's like, if this is so easy, tell him if it's getting boring for him. Maybe he should challenge himself. I love Thorkell's character. He's great. He's such chaos, but it's like not an evil chaos. It's just kind of neutral. He's just like, it's like, I like that he talks, Floki talks about the flow of the world, and Thorkell's kind of like, it's kind of what I'm doing. I'm just kind of going with the flow, and whatever comes my way that's a challenge, I'm taking it. So I like that conversation. That's really, really good. It's great. And he's just sitting there towering above all those men. So they go back to the king, and there's no chance we'll be able to convince him. And I like, it was a waste of time. And Floki's like, well, then what are we going to do? And I like that the king is constantly in the shadows. The king's like he's constantly just been over in the shadows. Like, he's just wasting away. Like, when his hand comes up and there's like all the rings and his like fingers are so bony, like it's just, he's wasting away, right? I like the king is always shrouded in darkness, right? And he just seems bored. And he definitely seems weak, right? So I like him reaching out and saying, attack them without delay. And so that's what they do. They go to attack the bridge, but it does not go well. The whole thing with them launching the logs into the ships like spears, like massive spears, is kind of insane. It's like, oh, I really hope that the blonde guy that's with Askeladd and them, I hope they didn't get killed. I hope they weren't some of the casualties. But Askeladd's smart. He's like, we're only gonna get close enough to steer the ship aside so that Thorfinn, who has like the legs of a freaking gazelle, can jump over to the bridge to attack Thorkell. That's as far as we're getting, right? And he's like, what's wrong with Sweyn's army? Why don't you come up with something? I know you can do better if you try. Yeah, that's Thorkell's whole thing. He's like, come on, where's the strategy? How you gonna face us? You're just gonna keep rowing to us? Where's the fun in that? Like, he's challenging them. He's like, what kind of, he's like, no wonder he switched sides. He's like, there's no challenge here. He's like, you're just using numbers. That's the thing. The king right now has the numbers to keep throwing troops at the front lines, but Thorkell's like, what's the fun in that? Where's the strategy in that? He's like, you're just gonna end up killing all these men. He's like, you won't capture London Bridge in 100 years at this rate. And then I love that he just looks at me, he's like, oh, there's a kid. Like, it's great. Again, he could have thrown the spear at the boat. He doesn't do it. He waits to see what happens. And Thorfinn's like, he's like, this guy looks fun, even though Thorfinn looks the least like fun. Thorfinn is the least fun-looking character in this show. He's the least fun-looking character, but Thorkell's like, look at you. Like, it's great. It's wonderful. This guy looks fun. And Askeladd's like, can you hear me? The huge man in front with the log. Get him! That's Thorkell. He's like, sick him, boy. And Bjorn's like, let's not get any closer. And he's like, we're going to veer left so that we don't get hit and that we can toss Thorfinn at him like a little projectile. Oh my god. And yeah, Thorfinn takes the shield off. And I love that he's like, don't touch him, this jolly little fool. And then, yeah, he just flies over there. This battle scene is amazing. I freaking love it. I love the fight between Thorkell and Thorfinn. You can just feel the weight of it. The weight of him spinning the log, the weight of his movement. You can just feel it. It's so good. And Thorfinn's just like, damn it. He's like exhausted 2 minutes into the battle, right? And then Thorkell's like, oh, I love, he's like, a little warrior. Okay. He's like, I'll face you. And Thorfinn's like, He says, you're good for a kid. I love it. So he's like, I'll answer the challenge of this suicide attacker like a duel, right? And he throws I love he just throws the log overboard. Like, doesn't even care. As arrows are flying, he's like, it's one-on-one. And Thorfinn's like, okay. But yeah, and the thing of it is, he's so tall, his vital points are high up that Thorfinn has to be taller to really have a better shot at getting them. I love when Thorfinn's like, don't underestimate me. And I'm like, dude, don't underestimate Thorkell. Oh, it's great. I love that you feel the pressure of it. It's great. The animation of this whole fight is wonderful. It's great. And Thorkell can take some blows. He's like, oh, my wrist. Like, his whole arm gets, like, cut up. And he's like, oh, good job, kid. Look at you. Just doesn't even consider him a threat. Kind of like Askeladd. Mm-hmm. Except Askeladd knows how to manipulate people and their emotions. So that's why he's so confident. Thorkell's so confident because he's freaking huge. And, like, it does not go down easily. Like, he slams part of the bridge off. It's great. Oh. And Thorfinn's so tiny compared to him. He, like, cracks his neck. It's great. But, yeah, I like that Thorfinn, he tries to, like, kick him down. And he ends up stabbing him through the hand. Oh. It's wonderful. And then Thorkell just flops him around like a rag doll. And I love that Askeladd's like, well, that's a shame. That won't work. Thorfinn's gonna get beat to a pulp up there. He's like, I guess this wasn't gonna work. And then he's like, okay, bye! I love Bjorn's like, hey, that's the signal we need to get out of here. And he's like, oh yeah, it's time to retreat. See ya, Thorfinn, come back! So, it's funny because I've said this entire time that Thorfinn, I've said this entire time that Askeladd's had like a little smidgen of affinity for Thorfinn. I say smidgen because, yeah, he just up and leaves Thorfinn. Doesn't try to rescue him. Nope. Leaves him to die. But the thing is, I think that Askeladd has enough faith in Thorfinn that he's like, okay, Thorkell's not just going to kill him. He would have already done so. He's playing with the kid. He's playing with him. He's probably going to see if he still wants to duel. Thorfinn has enough survival instinct that as soon as he gets away from Thorkell, he'll leave because he knows it's a losing battle. So I'm like, he'll probably swim up and come crawling back to me, so we can just go. Like, he has that much faith that Thorfinn's going to show back up. It's kind of insane. Mm-hmm. And I love that Thorkell's like, no way, come back. He's like, the battle ended while I was playing with the kid. He's like, aw. And of course, Thorfinn, he was just pretending long enough to try to get a hit at him. He's like, is he dead? He's like, hey, you. And that's when Thorfinn cuts off his fingers. Mm-hmm. To get away with the knife. Yep. Now, does he take the other knife? He has the one knife that was his dad's, right? And he's like, oh, hey. Now, is the knife he has, though, that's not his dad's, though, right? Isn't that the one he took? The knife that Thorkell has is his dad's, isn't it? So I'm trying to see if he pulls it out. He's like, even though you're small, you have a good will to fight. So he does throw the knife down. Okay. And he says, you're a warrior. Tell me your name. And that's when Thorfinn, I was waiting for it. I was like, oh, reveal it. Tell him your name. And he says that he's Thorfinn, son of Thor's. Mm-hmm. And I like that Thorkell's like, oh, Thor's? Hey, wait, is it the same Thor's that I know? And then, did he not grab the other sword? The other knife? I don't think he grabbed the other knife. So I thought the one that he didn't grab was the one that was his dad's. But maybe not. Maybe the one he kept was the one that was his dad's. Here's the thing. If it wasn't, if the knife that he didn't grab was his dad's, it's still with Thorkell. I feel like Thorkell's going to take it and keep it. And then maybe that will give Thorfinn a reason to go back to try to get the knife back from him that was his father's. That image of his hand shooting up and there's just blood spurting out of the fingers that are cut. Insanity. And I also love that you see his fingernails, and his fingernails are just like rotted and like gross and cracked. Ugh. It's crazy. He's like, promise me you'll come back and fight me. He's gonna come back and fight him. Yeah, that's gonna happen. They're gonna meet up again. And I have a feeling that he's gonna take the dagger that was Thorfinn's father's and keep it as a memento until they see each other again. I feel like that's gonna happen. So we go to the campsite, right? The campsite where all the troops are. And here's the thing. If you look around in this, there are no nurses. There's no women here. It's all just it's pirates treating pirates, Vikings treating Vikings. And the Viking way of treating people at a first aid site is a little bit different than what you'd expect, but shouldn't be surprising. The one guy's like, anybody want to be killed? Bring out your dead? Like, he's just going around being like, nobody else can take it, I'll kill you right now. Seems legit. It fits the Viking lifestyle, right? It fits it. And then he's like, I can kill you if you want. And then, of course, Askeladd's like, this guy's not going to make it. He's been stabbed in the gut. We can't save him. And then the one guy's like, bring some onion soup over here. I'm like, why onion soup? Oh. And he's like, Thorgrim, take care of this. I feel like if anybody's going to be an executioner in this show, it should be Thorgrim. Thorgrim sounds like the most executioner style name possible. And so Askeladd's like, we can't carry around dead weight. If they're not going to make it, get rid of them now. Don't make them suffer. Just mercy kill them and go on, right? So then the king and Floki and the armies are marching through the campsite. Interesting. And he's like, so we can't capture London. And Floki disagrees. So the king questions. He says that London is a bust. He says there's no point in pursuing London. It's not going to work out. It's not going to work. Floki thinks that they can capture London. It is just going to take time. It's just going to take time to do so. He's like, if we're patient, we can take it. And the king's like, I ain't got time for that. He's like, it's not that we can't capture London. It will just take some time. And the king's like, well, how much time, Floki? He's like, it depends on the size of their stockpile. So Floki's whole thing is like, we'll wait them out. He's like, if we keep attacking them, we attack them to the point where they have to use up all their stockpiles. As long as we keep men and we keep food and we keep weaponry coming, we can outlast them and take them. And the king's like, yeah, sure. But it's all, he's like, a year. If we fight for a year. So he thinks it can happen in 6 months to 1 year. The king is all about winter is coming, right? The king has very Ned Stark vibes, where the king's like, no, winter is coming. I do appreciate the king is a little bit realistic and like, yeah, we could do that in a year, but in 6 months, if things go well, he's like, but it's not going to happen in 6 months because it's already autumn. He's like, Floki, we're not going to be able to take them in 6 months. That will be the dead of winter. He's like, that we are not prepared for that. So he's like, we cannot spend so much time on just one city. Which I don't think he's wrong. I think he's like, we can't spend all of our time and resources on this one location when there is the rest of England to worry about taking over. And Floki says nothing in response. He says the overall situation is most important. So he's like, let's think of the overall situation. We want to win the war, not the battle, right? Which is not, that involves running away in a sense, and that's kind of against the warrior Viking way. In a big sense, Floki and Thorkell and all them are all about, we fight till the end, right? And we only retreat if it's necessary. And the king is like, no, we do the smart thing and we do whatever it takes, even if it means we run away. He's like, in everything we do, we must prioritize gaining control over all of England. And Floki's like, okay. And so he's like, we're going to move our main forces to the west. And so we're going to leave 4,000 soldiers to continue the siege on London. So a fifth, right? So they had 20,000 troops there. And we're going to leave 4 of them at London. So he's playing it safe. He's like, on the best case scenario, we do Floki's plan. We leave 4,000 here. We just keep continuing the siege, try to wear them down. Maybe it'll work. But if it doesn't, we've only lost a fifth of the army. We still have 4/5 that we can take over the rest of England with. So it's not a totally lost cause. It's like, I'd rather sacrifice a fifth and keep assaulting them than sacrifice my whole army and not take notice of the rest of the country. And then the king says the 4,000 soldiers will be under the command of Canute. In the shadows, our pretty boy. So I have theories. They're probably wrong. They're probably very wrong. Probably very, very wrong. I think Canute's a woman. I think Canute's a girl. I don't know. I could be very wrong. The way that Ragnar is so sure that we should leave Canute out of this. So we're leaving it all to Canute. We don't know really anything about Canute. I think Canute's a lady. I think that Canute's a woman. Guys in this series don't have glossy hair that glossy and straight. Sorry, that's just not possible. Nope, I think Canute's a woman in disguise. Because here's the thing, I think that they said that the only thing I can think of is that Canute was raised away from the king, but is successor to the throne. Who's to say that they raised her up to be a man to take over? I don't know. Canute's probably a guy, but I just have this like little crack theory that Canute's a woman and to take over. I could be very well wrong. But Ragnar seems like they were the one that raised Canute. And they are very much against Canute fighting. Very much against it. Which is curious because if Canute is the one that's supposed to take over as king of Denmark, that should have been expected, right? So why is Ragnar fighting so hard to keep Canute from battle? Unless Canute's a woman and Ragnar knows it and doesn't want it to be revealed. I don't know. Canute's probably a guy, but it's very curious that Ragnar does not want them fighting. He's like, this is a good chance to boost his standing. And I like that as the king's saying this, Floki has already turned around to look back at Ragnar. Floki really does not like Ragnar. Does not like Ragnar at all. Right? He thinks that Ragnar spoiled Canute. And Ragnar's like, no, wait a minute. That's not what we agreed upon. The reason His Highness came to serve as a good example for the people. That's what you said. And Floki's like, come on. Did you not see this coming? Like, you thought he was just going to come here to be a figurehead? He's like, this is His Highness's will. He's like, against Thorkell, the entire army stands no chance. It's like, to defeat him with only 1/5 of the forces is impossible. He's like, this is a suicide mission. We're just wearing them down, but we're not going to win. And the king's like, having so few men is the only way to help him. But His Highness is unfamiliar with battle and experiencing emotional distress. That's what got me. I was like, emotional distress? What? I was like, is he on his period because he's a woman? I don't know. I was just like, I was so curious. I'm like, emotional distress. I mean, yeah, he looks kind of sad sitting in that tent, but he doesn't look like he's stressed out. Ragnar, what are we doing? Under emotional distress. That I never thought that would be like an excuse given in this world because it seems so outlandish. And then the king's like, this is your responsibility, Ragnar. This is your business. He's like, maybe it's because of the teachings of Christ. He grew up to be faint of heart even though he's a man. Is he? Yeah, but I mean, so the king's blaming it on his religion, like religious upbringing that's made him soft and faint of heart. It's because you spoiled him. And Ragnar's like, well, like, I apologize. I mean, yeah, maybe. And Floki just looks so disgusted with him. He's like, ugh. He's like, you're not a warrior at all. Even though, which is funny coming from Floki, right? He's like, to Canute, I shall leave the soldiers laying siege to London. You shall accompany him and provide support as his assistant. Ragnar's like, damn it. Yeah, you can tell he's flustered, but it's like, what? Something's going on. Something's up. Something's up with Canute. He's like, Your Highness. Something's up with Canute, and I'm so curious. I don't want to know. I don't want to be spoiled, but I'm like, is Canute a woman? Is Canute like a really crazy fighter? Is Canute just super weak? We don't know anything about Canute. That's going to be interesting. I'm wondering if Canute and Thorfinn are going to cross paths at some point. I don't know. I'm so curious. But yeah, so we float down the river, and there's just bodies getting picked on by crows. There's just like planks and everything, and then you see Thorfinn rising up out of the water. And our poor boy, he has sprained his ankle, he's dislocated his shoulder, broken his ribs. He's not in the best condition right now. I'm trying to see if he's got both of his daggers. He has the one in the front pocket. We see that, right? He doesn't have the other one. He lost one of the daggers. The question is, did he lose his father's dagger, or is the one in front of him his father's dagger? I thought that the one he lost was the father's, but I don't know for sure. But yeah, poor Thorfinn. This episode's so beautifully animated. I love it. That madman. And then, yeah, and Thorkell's like, well, can you see him? And they're like, well, it looks like they're retreating. And he's like, no. He's like, and they're like, we won. They ran away with their tails between his legs. And Thorkell's like, this isn't right. He's like, no. He's like, you guys got to come back and battle me. He's like, let's fight some more. Like, he's like a little kid. And then he gets pissed off. He's like, you're cowards, you idiots. He's like, quit being, he's like, why are you giving up? Come back, you cowards. But I don't think it says fight me. So if we're talking about people being slaves to things, Thorkell is definitely a slave to fighting. He's a slave to the battle. He goes wherever the biggest challenge is, no matter what, and that's all he's consumed with is the thought of battling someone. He's consumed by that. How about that? Ooh, buddy. And then, yeah. And then we just see, I like Askeladd's new robe, his new cloak there with the stripes. I like that. He's like, what a pain. He's like, Thorkell, you bastard. We still got to stick around. And then he's like, oh, look. What happened? You still alive? Askeladd's like, oh, hey, look, you showed back up. Like he was expecting him to come at some point. And I wonder if that whole Thorkell, you bastard line, I wonder if it was directed towards him fighting Thorfinn and nearly killing him, or if it was him like making this whole war like go in a different direction than what Askeladd originally thought. It's curious, right? He's like, oh, hey, you're still alive? He's like, you look terrible. I love it. I love that Askeladd's like, you look like shit. Where you been? Poor Thorfinn. Poor Thorfinn. He's like, you had a bad opponent, Thorfinn. It's like, you bit off more than you could chew. And Thorfinn's like, I did it because you asked me to. But he's so consumed. He's like, by the way, I'm going to march on Wessex. What about you? He's like, you going to come with me? And Thorfinn's like, I'll leave you here. And he just takes it and just relocates his shoulder. Ugh. And Askeladd's like, okay. And he just takes off to join the crew. Limping along. And he's like, oh, kid. He's like, you're still so consumed with revenge. That little smile on Askeladd's face at the end, he's like, yeah, he's going to keep following me. He's like, I've got a loyal dog because he wants to bite me and I've not. He wants this chance to bite. And so all these guys are marching. There's ones with like cuts on them. Like everything, they're talking about getting rich in Wessex. They're just being driven. They're slaves to the money, slaves to the battle. They're like, I can't wait. The one guy, like, he's like, you've only got one arm. He's like, I can handle anyone. And they're all just like such in jovial spirits, all these Vikings. And Thorfinn, meanwhile, looks like he's just miserable. Like the way that he's drawn, he looks miserable. And you can think about Thorfinn and just how dangerous it was. And how he got thrown about. And how he still wanted to fight him, even after losing his fingers and saying it was fun. And I love that shot of Thorfinn there where he's like, I don't understand. He's like that madman. And that shot of him from underneath where he says, what's so enjoyable about battle? God, that expression, it looks so awful. He looks so terrible. Like Thorfinn just being in such pain. Right? Oh, he just looks like he's in such pain. But yeah, so this episode. So hopefully I want more with Canute. I want to get, Canute is the mystery box right now. We don't know anything about Canute. Thorkell, we finally got him back in the game since episode 1, which kind of makes sense because if we started with episode 8 and then we built back up from the beginning, now you see Thorkell again, you're like, oh yeah, he's the guy from, those chapters. And so poor Thorfinn, he's just long-suffering, doesn't understand what would be enjoyable about battle. What's so enjoyable about it? I'm glad that Thorfinn's in that mindset, in a way, because that was Thor's whole thing. Thor's is like, there's nothing enjoyable about this. It's not fun. He's like, he's very apathetic about it, right? He was just following along because those were his orders. It kind of ties Thorfinn a little bit to Thor's in a way. If we're going to put Thor's over here, is that back before Thor's met Helga and decided that her and Ylva were worth not battling for, Thor's was just following orders. He was just following orders and was very apathetic towards battle. He was honorable and respectful, but he was just fighting because that's what he was told to do. So I feel like there's a nice tie-in with Thor's and Thorfinn here, in that Thorfinn's like, what's enjoyable about this? But it's the irony is, it's like, Thorfinn, you don't have to be here. But he is, because he's so driven by revenge, but he just doesn't see the point. So I like that connection between Thorfinn and Thor's. They're kind of in the same boat at this point of the game, except Thor's had his wife and his daughter that he found a need to protect and stray away from fighting for. And Thorfinn's kind of ran in the opposite direction because he's lost that person he cared about. That's what keeps him going in this whole deal. So that's really interesting. But yeah, I like that we've gotten all these different likes, dislikes, similarities, dissimilarities. They're driving factions. Canute's the mystery box. I want more on Canute. Ragnar and Canute, they are the mysterious elements of this so far. Floki and Askeladd and King Sweyn and Bjorn and Thorkell and Thorfinn, I like following all their characters and seeing them fleshed out more. But the real mystery is Canute. Canute's in the shadows. I want more info. I want to know what's up with Canute. What's their deal? Are they indeed a man like we are led to believe? Or why is Ragnarok so intent on Canute not fighting? Is he really that weak? He's got the helmet and stuff. Is he really that weak? What's the deal? Or is it like a Valkyrie where it's actually a warrior woman? I don't know. I'm probably wrong. It's probably a dude. And it'll be fine if it's a guy, but it's just fun to theorize. So we shall find out, though, right? I'm curious to know your thoughts down below, what you guys thought of this episode, what you guys think of Thorkell. I have a feeling that people are either going to really like him or really not like him. I really like him so far, but we'll see where that goes to. But please, no spoilers, but I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with episode 10 of Vinland Saga.